what the Kol Ezrach B'Yisrael is. Yeshu B'Sukkis will sit in Sukkis. It's known the examination of this language about this. The Tchila Namar B'Sukkis. Initially, it says Sukkis. What's the idea of a sukkah? Sukkah is something that is temporary, something that is not a place that you live in. Shazel in Yanaroi, that's the idea of something that's temporary. Until this is a crucial type of condition. One of the rules of making up a sukkah is it has to be something that's temporary. You can't make it like a building that is set and established. The roof can't be made of beams and things like that, because it has to be a temporary type of dwelling. And immediately afterwards it says the term teshvu, you shall sit. The idea of sitting indicates sitting is not just literally sitting like a chair. The word yeshiva means settling, that you shall settle in a sukkah. Settling is just the opposite than a temporary dwelling. You don't settle in a temporary dwelling. You settle in a home. Ein yeshiva lashna kava. The word yeshiva is only used for something that you are, something that you're settled over there, you're established over there, etc. In addition to this, in what type of way am I settled over there? What type of way am I inhabiting it? In a way of 7 days. So the Rebbe is going to point out the number 7 shows on completion. It shows on something that is done in such a manner that it encompasses the whole framework of time, which is divided over 7 days, and so we can explain also 7 millennia. So that's just the opposite of having a temporary place. If it's something that's temporary, you're not going to make it a 7-day thing. So he says, that the idea of 7 days indicates that it's something that is set and something that's established. Because the 7 days includes in it all the days of creation. The way the whole entire creation is set in such a way of 7 days. In other words, it's established in a way of 7 and again 7 and again 7. You have the 6 days of the creation. Along with the 7th day. That was the conclusion and that was the sealing of the entire creation. And this is something that repeats itself all the time. That we say that similar to this every single week. It's like it's explained in many places about how every single week it's really a whole new period of time. That's why every first day of the week, every Sunday is called the first day. Why is it called the first day? Seemingly it shouldn't be called the first day. It should be called, the second Sunday of creation should be called day number 8. The third Sunday of creation should have been 16, etc., etc. Why is that so? Since the entire 6,000 years that the world exists is divided over 7 days. It's periods of 7 days. And when you finish one period of 7 days, otherwise known as a week, you return back to the beginning. You have another period of 7 days, because 7 days is a complete idea, a complete thing. And afterwards begins another 7 days. Despite the fact that 7 days shows that shows on this type of set, established thing where we're going through an entire period. So still in all, ha-mitzvah, the mitzvah is Shabbat in Shalarai in Sukkot, which is an idea of something that's temporary. Yiyah in Yeshiva should be an idea of being settled. Teshbו, you shall settle. Ba'if in the Shivas Yom in a way of 7 days. So it seems to be two opposites. You have something that's temporary, and over there you're settling, and not just settling for a moment or for an hour, for a day, but for an entire period of 7 days, which shows on completion. Gam Yidur Diaknoisif, it's also known an additional examination of the text. The Hine, in the Basukis Baruchnias, Moidal Inyan Shal Makiv. The spiritual idea of Sukkot shows on the concept of that which is encompassing and transcendent. V'cheinu kipshutei. And so too, it's in the literal sense. The sukkah encompasses, surrounds the person that's sitting in the sukkah. Top of the second page. And also this, that the sukkah has to be encompassing, is a crucial and a vital and a main condition of the sukkah. The person, at least his head and the majority of his body, has to be within the sukkah. That shows that the sukkah has to surround him. At least he has to surround most of it. Became, despite the fact that it's the idea of makiv, is that it says after it, Leman Yedu. So you should know, there is Seichem generations. Yediyah is just the opposite of makif, as we know throughout Chassidus. The idea of Yediyah, first of all, without even going into the level of das specifically, but in general, when I know something, I'm knowing a Yeda Hadavar, that's something that enters within me. It's not something that's outside of me. It's not something that's beyond me. And now especially, the idea of das is even more so an idea that shows I'm being internalized. Until in the specific matters of that in these three things is how intellect becomes divided in general. The most inner level in intellect itself. Which of these three things, Chacham Bina Das, is the most internal, the most part of me, the most internalized, and the very opposite of being makif? When for Chacham Bina comes down into the idea of das, it becomes in the way of Yediyah, as we said in the pasuk, Laman Yedu Deresechem, they should know. How much more so according to the explanation of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. She is the Alter Rebbe right away in the beginning of Tanya in Perek Gimel explains that das is that he stakes in, he embeds his mind, his thought very strongly in the topic that he understands in his Chachma Bina. This indicates and the idea of Pnimius itself, it's in a way of strength and in a way that it exists. Being an idea, like it's explained in many places about the idea of the advantage of Yediyah. Just like it's understood in the literal sense also, that's the idea of Yediyah, that it's something, through das, it's something that remains with him, it stays with him. It's not just an idea, I thought about it, and it's gone, in one ear and out the other. From this we also see, but when it says the pasuk L'man Yedu, it says by Sukkot you should settle. It has to be in a way of Yediyah, of knowledge, L'man Yedu, like it says, so you should know. Ubefrat, and especially al piadin, according to the halacha, she'inin the man Yedu deresechem goyim ruchelik mitzvah sukkah. The idea of that your generation should know is part of the mitzvah of Sukkot. In other words, like the Rebbe is about to point out, there are certain mitzvahs where the kavanah is not part of the mitzvah. It's just an extra thing. You have the mitzvah, and for a better, greater, more beautiful mitzvah, you have the kavanah. Certain mitzvahs, but the kavanah is part of the mitzvah. So he says, this L'man Yedu is part of the mitzvah itself. So he's saying, mitzvahs, that by Sukkot, it's not like in the majority of mitzvahs. That the intention and the knowledge is something in addition to, it's something separate than the fulfillment of the mitzvah. You fulfill the mitzvah, and you could also have the knowledge and the kavanah and so on. Ella ba'ifin, rather the mitzvah of sukkah is in such a manner so that your generation should know who chelik mekiyim mitzvah sukkah. It's part of the obligation. It's part of the mitzvah of the fulfillment of the mitzvah of sukkah. And it brings in the commentary on the side. This is brought down in Shulchan Aruch that the person has to have in mind when he's sitting in the sukkah, that he's sitting in it to fulfill the mitzvah of the Eibishter that he commanded us to sit in the sukkah as a remembrance to Yetzias Mitzrayim, etc., with the whole story. And this is similar to another mitzvah that we know that the intention is part of the mitzvah. This is similar to the idea of that we're supposed to think about when we put on film, and it's brought down also in the Siddur, and that we have to have in mind when we're putting on the Tefillin Shel Yad, the Tefillin Shel Rosh, that we are sublimating our heart and sublimating our mind with putting on film. So, in a similar vein, we need to also have this in mind when we're talking about Sukkah. It's also understood from the language of the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch. Moving from all this is understood that the idea of that, so that they should know, that's in the mitzvah of sukkah, in the mitzvah of sukkah itself, it's in such a manner that in the pnimius itself, how much it goes in, it's added that should be in the strength, and it should be the most inner level of the most inner level. For example, just by knowing, just by having seichel, just by having Chokmah Bina, he's already in a level of Pnimius. But by having it in the level of Das, in a way of B'choizik, so it's a lot of strength and a lot of awareness, so for sure it's in a way of much more of Pnimius to Pnimius. So we have, again, this type of dichotomy over here. We need to understand, according to this, and what's the connection with, so they should know, with the beginning and the primary core of this idea? It has to be specifically in the manner of in Sukkos, which is the idea of Makif. So how does it fit in with Yediyah, which is supposed to be Pnimius? And to note, Shehein HaMashiach is Inyan Zeh, Inyan HaMakif the Sukkos. It's true. It could be this idea of the transcendent, encompassing level of Sukkot and the internalized level of settling 7 days, and so that you should know. Top of page Zayin, even though we could justify and figure out that they could be together, but the Rebbe says, but why? We still need to understand what's the reason. Specifically in the mitzvah of Sukkot, that the way how one fulfills the one who fulfills the will of the one that mitzvah the mitzvahs through the bond and the joining of two matters. The idea of sukkahs with the idea so that they should know. Seemingly they are opposites. In other words, even we say, nothing is impossible, nothing is strange, everything can go together. Makif, Pnimi, Makif, and Pnimi Sheva Pnimi. But the question is, there must be a certain reason why of all the mitzvahs, specifically the mitzvah of Sukkah, we join the two opposites. Now another question, line 5. Also we need to understand what he adds and he concludes. Every citizen in Yisrael should sit in Sukkahs. The Lechora seemingly it already said beforehand, you shall sit in Sukkahs. Who is the you addressing to? It's addressing all the Yidden. So it's already including all the Yidden. Why does he repeat again? Every Ezrach Yisrael should settle in Sukkahs. Seemingly, it's unnecessary to say that. In addition to this, he calls the one that fulfills the mitzvah by the description of Ezrach. Ezrach is, first of all, a very unique and, in a way, not a common term that we find that often. And it doesn't usually say that. If it says it at all, I don't think it says by any other mitzvah, Kol Ezrach b'Yisrael should do whatever other mitzvah. Here, all of a sudden, by Sukkot, it says this term Ezrach. Why? Let's examine what an Ezrach is. The idea of Ezrach is the opposite of a ger, like the expression of the pasuk. The Ezrach and the ger should do certain mitzvahs. So the fact that it says in the pasuk, Ezrach and ger are mechuyev to do certain things, so that means that includes there is a category of Ezrach and a totally different category, which is ger. Ger means he's someone new. He just moved in. That's a ger. Ezrach means he's established, he's part of the community, he's a citizen, etc., etc. What's the significance in the idea of doing mitzvahs? By a ger, so this is something new. Whatever he's doing, it's something new because he just came. Ezrach indicates that his connection to whatever is going on is not in a way that it's something novel and new. That's what he is. That's what he's about. That's what I mean of Ezrach. This is part of his being. Concerning this, it says every Ezrach Yisrael will settle in Sukkot. Seemingly, how is it possible to say about every single Yid that they are all in the level of Ezrach? Not everybody's holding by a level where Torah mitzvahs is natural to them, it's part of their very being, etc., etc. Especially according to the Chazal deriving from this pasuk that says, Kol Ezrach b'Yisrael Yeshu b'Sukkos. So they learn out from this that Ru'uyin Kol Yisrael Leisha b'Sukkah Achas, that it's appropriate, it's worthy, it's possible for all Yidden to sit in one sukkah. In other words, there's no different levels of the Yidden. So how can you say, if you're being so inclusive, you're having in the English expression, a big tent, here you're having a big sukkah, you're inclusive, everybody's invited, everybody's part of it. If everybody's invited and everybody's part of it, so why do we say that it's to everybody in the way of like it's just as natural as their level of Ezra? Any questions before we go on? Ois Beis, line 20, the third page of your downloads. This will be understood by first prefacing the general idea of the Yom Tov of Sukkot. That on Sukkot become revealed the matters of Rosh Hashanah. Like it says in the pasuk, you should blow in the month shofar in the Kesed to the day of our Chag. So we know that Chag, without any appellation describing which Chag, Sukkot is called Chag. Kesed is the day that's concealed because the moon is concealed on Rosh Hashanah. The only Yom Tov is on the first of the month, so therefore the moon is concealed. That's one of the explanations. But Al Pichsidis, we're saying, Hainu, this means Shen Yonim, the Rosh Hashanah Shoyabay from the Bakesem, those matters that took place on Rosh Hashanah in a way that was concealed, all the spiritual revelations that took place on Rosh Hashanah in a way that's concealed, Boy B'Chag Sukkos Ba'Efer Shal Gilui, come out in Sukkos in a way of revelation. Bakesem L'Yom Chagenu, from the concealment it comes out to our day of our Chag, the day of Sukkos. First and foremost, what from Rosh Hashanah comes out in a way of revelation on Sukkot, the beginning of the pasuk, Tiku b'Chodesh Shofar, the main part of this entire Rosh Hashanah, which is The idea of the blowing of shofar and Rosh Hashanah, Yisrael like the custom of Yisrael, which that itself is Torah, is to blow 100 blasts of the shofar. In the Indians, the 100 blasts of the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah is drawn down and becomes revealed in the Yom Tov of Sukkot. Like it's explained in the different svarim concerning the schach of the sukkah, that the sheschach, the word schach, samach, and two chavs, that's 60 and 20, that's shum gimamatria meir. That's the numerical equivalent of 100. Keneged meir koils, that's kil shofar, corresponds to the 100 blasts of shofar blowing. And more specifically, you have three parts of the word, samach, chav, and chav. And you have different sections of the shofar blowing. You have the tkiyah, the shvarim, the truah. More specifically, nechlak l'samach, chav, and chav, top of page ches. Samach tkiyas, there's 60 tkiyas, plain blast. Chav truas, 20 blast are truah, v'chav shvarim, and 20 that are the broken blast of shvarim. Like to explain in different places at length, the idea of how the 60 corresponds to the tkiyas, etc., etc. The key which Sarachli is Beseidim Mesudar Avodah Mesudar is, since everything has to be in an organized way, in a avodah that's organized, so to be able to come from something that's totally concealed into the revelation of Sukkot, there needs to be a progression. You can't just right away reveal it in totality. It's in such a manner that initially it comes down the way that's makif, that's Sukkot. Sukkot is the idea of makif, like we said. Afterwards, from the makif, it comes down, internalized, like we said. It's teshbו, it's the idea of settling, it's the idea of l'man yedu, it's the idea of knowledge, because that is the progression coming from Rosh Hashanah to draw down the revelation from Rosh Hashanah into what we experience on Sukkot. Line 6. It's known, the novelty and uniqueness of the month of Tishrei, beginning from the 7th month, at the first day of the month. That's the beginning of the pasuk that says, over there it says, right at the beginning, you should blow in the month shofar. What are we doing then? What is that time about? Then it becomes what it says in the pasuk, peace, peace. He's greeting. In Yeshaya Navi says that he's greeting peace to the one that's far and to the one that's close. And the Chazal say, how can you greet someone that's far? If he's far, you can't greet him. But it means the first piece, the first greeting is l'rochek shenasa karev, to the one that's far that became close. Whereas it says, the second one is lakarev, to someone that was always close, in other words, the tzaddik. That became close, that's the idea of the Baal Tshuva. Until we're talking about the most highest level of Tshuva, like it says, the spirit shall return to the Eibishter that gave it. Though Hashem gave it, what's it mean he gave it? He lowered it down. The Sha'avra Kol Protei Madregis, it went through all the specific levels, the Tahiri, that it's pure. Lachris, and afterwards it went down to the level of Barasa, you created her. And then Yitzarta, you formed her, Unfachta, and you blew her into me, Yachabal, Mata, Beira Mikta, until it came down here below into a deep pit. Shazeu, Inin Shorichel Gadol. That is a very great distance. From the being distant, he became close. And this itself, that he was distant and now he became close, not only did he become close to the place that he was before the distance, in other words, he returned to the original place that he started from, but rather, as it's explained concerning the descent for the sake of an ascent, the ascent is to a much higher level. until an ascent that's incomparable to the level from which the descent came from. In other words, it's the elevation higher than where he descended from initially. So just like it's concerning in general when the neshama comes down here into this world, that by coming down here into this world, it doesn't just return to the exact same place it started from, it returns to much higher. The same thing when it comes to tshuva similar to this concerning someone that was far that became close. In other words, the one that did tshuva, he becomes much closer than someone that was never far. Like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva. Baal Tshuva is beloved and special by the Creator as if he never sinned. And not only is he as special as someone that never sinned, but more so, but that rather his reward is much greater. The Chacham said, by the place that Baal Tshuva stand, even complete tzaddikim cannot stand over there, cannot be over there. This means to say, that the one that was distant and became close, their level is higher than the level of those that never sinned. To such a degree, he cries out and he's immediately answered by Hashem. Like it says, and it'll be before they will call out, I will respond. Like all the specific details that the Rambam explains over there in Hilchos Tshuva. This is also the general advantage and quality of the Baal Tshuva. That his avodah is with much greater strength and power than would be before than he was, even someone that's a tzaddik. According to what was said before, that the uniqueness and novelty of Rosh Hashanah is that someone that's distant became close, moving it's understood. The idea of Rosh Hashanah, blowing in the Chodesh, the shofar, is in a way of joining opposites. Someone that's close someone that was far became close, and even much more closer than someone that was close initially. Moving that's also understood from the fact that the order of the avodah of Rosh Hashanah is in such a way that from the constraints I called out to the Eibishter, and through that I have responded in broadness and breadth, just like the shofar is narrow and broad. That's the idea of joining of the opposites, constraints, limitation, and broadness together. Specifically from the constraints we come to the broadness of Hashem. That says that any year that's poor at the beginning becomes rich at the end. So the Rebbe says we don't have to wait the end of the year to be rich, but this riches becomes immediately when the sound and the blast of the shofar comes out of the broad side of the shofar, because he's then reaches and he's bound up with the broadness of Yudke. That's the essential broadness, the broadness of Hashem's very essence. The broadness of Hashem's very essence and being, like it's explained in many places, at length. So this what the Rebbe is going to say, that we have these two extremes on Rosh Hashanah, and because of the two extremes that we have on Rosh Hashanah, that's why we have similar joining of extremes on Sukkot.